why all brains matter, and what you need to know if your child ever comes and asks, "What's wrong with me?" Hear from a mother today who went from thinking it shouldn't be this hard to being diagnosed with autism and ADHD and finding a parenting style that offered her solutions to have her autonomy and not needing to lax her boundaries when parenting children with neurodiversity. Hear about defiance, pathological demand avoidance, and why a lot of people with autism desperately need connection with other human beings. And lastly, how to thrive through sensitivity. My name is Annette, and with Effortless Parenting, I encourage parents to embrace boundaries with strong-willed and sensitive children so they can cherish a bond for life. My guest today is Jess Prinsloo, and we met through our common organization. We're with Positive Discipline Association. And funnily, the abbreviation is PDA, and that's actually how we met, but not through the association. We met, we have a group chat, and you had put a question up regarding the pathological demand avoidance. Please correct me in a moment. And I was fascinated because when you got talking and then our colleagues and our mentor replied, I went, that is exactly me. That's who I was as a child. I have these tendencies in one of my children, and we have met a couple of times since. And I just feel that we need to share this conversation with the parents who are in that same boat, So before we'll get right in, I would like you to maybe introduce yourself, just share where you are and the age of your children, and then we'll get right into our topic for today. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, firstly, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to speak to you. I always enjoy speaking to you. So I am based in Midrand in South Africa. I have four boys, two of whom are my biological kids, and two I'm guardian of, and they are 13, 10, 9, and 6. It out loud now, realizing that I have a teenager is just crazy to me.
Yes, right. And my firstborn is going on 15. And I know that in some cultures, 15 is considered an adult. And that's how I see her on this journey of being a parent. You found positive discipline. Please feel free to share how long ago that was. And I would love to hear from you how it has enriched your experience as a parent.
Cool. So I think I found it in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Sort of early 2019, and I started reading all the books and started getting into it. And when I start like becoming interested in a topic, then I go all in. And I'm like, I have to do everything that there is to do on this particular thing. I latch onto it. Um, and so I did the certification for the parent educator course, and so I became a certified parent educator early 2020, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And so I'd done one or two in-person workshops with parents, and I loved it. And then boom, no more in-person stuff. And so I did everything online, and I didn't do it myself. I was meeting with the Positive Discipline, the people who've been doing it forever, the association. And I happened to connect with a few other people in South Africa who also did it. And for me, it was such a paradigm shift. At first, I got into it because I wanted to learn how to just parent well. I wanted to give my kids the best opportunities, but I also wanted to manage their behavior. That was a big part of it. I had some struggles, and I wanted to solve the problems. And now when I look back, the paradigm shift has been very much that it's not about solving the problems. It is, like, don't get me wrong, like no one quote me on that, because positive discipline definitely helps you solve problems. But what it really has helped me do is look at my involvement in interactions like power struggles, and my involvement in putting demands on them when they are overstimulated, and me going, well, it just needs to get done. So let's just do it, just like suck it up. And how all of that stuff has to come first. So recognizing my triggers, my own ability to regulate, all of like it's dealing with my stuff first, and that ultimately at the end of the day, it's not anything really to do with their behavior. It's about modeling what I want as, our values as a family. It's about reinforcing, acknowledging, and focusing on the real positive things that these children are. Like, they're all such amazing individuals, but we get focused on, they're fighting again, and then it completely throws me. And then so I kind of tend to focus on all the negatives. I'm quite a pessimistic person at heart, and it's taught me to be more optimistic. It's taught me to be more focused on what I want to see in the future versus the problems that I'm trying to solve today.
Right.
It's been very, very valuable because I'm not a forward. All the problem. I see all the problems and I don't see the solutions. So helping me see the solutions and look inward has been hugely beneficial.
That you're just helping me realize something, just that this whole forward thinking, that was a whole new concept for me in positive discipline. And one of our colleagues shared on this whole PDA. It's also referred to as pervasive drive to autonomy.
Mhm.
So I want to hear a little bit from you on that, how this is all so proactive, about when we have these. Before we spoke about the PDA, I knew the ODD, right, the oppositional defiance disorder, and
Mhm.
I can also identify with that. I'd love to hear across these cultures. You're based in South Africa, I'm here in Ireland, and how now children don't want to kind of be obedient to these demands of the adults anymore, and how parents then have that tendency to give in. What have you learned there that you would like parents to hear, how positive discipline, has helped, especially with this, that children need autonomy?
So I think, I mean, autonomy for me has always been a big thing. I think I've never been a kind of a goo goo gaga parent.
Mhm.
So like when at the moment my children were born, they were like little individuals, and we spoke to them like little people. And so one of my biggest struggles was that my one son, my 9-year-old, was very, very eloquent in language very early on. So I would think of him as this little adult, and then I would forget that he has actually 1, 2-year-old emotions, which was really, really tough. But for me, I was very happy to grow their autonomy and all of that stuff. But I think there can be an issue with that sometimes, where it's giving them too much free rein and not having enough structure, not having enough routine, not keeping healthy boundaries. So it's like they say in positive discipline that, being too permissive or being too punitive are problematic. That's why we need to be kind and firm at the same time. And so I think autonomy is really, really important. It's important for every single individual in the world. And Gabor Mate has his wonderful example of how we're born and we need attachment and we need autonomy. But often, because when we're an infant, we that attachment is survival. So we'll take the attachment over the autonomy. And if that means relinquishing some of our autonomy, some of our sense of self, that goes towards our survival. And so we might grow up as children, learning to hide or suppress parts of ourselves that are not really congruent with how our family structure might be set up, or maybe our culture, or maybe just the dynamic that we have with our parents, or the whatever the extended family, and or the community, whatever it might be. And so it's finding that balance between the attachment and finding that love, and that true unconditional love, which it is unconditional in theory. But for every parent, we know that sometimes we don't like our kids very much. Sometimes it's really hard to be that one, all encompassing, I accept you for who you are, because sometimes they're really mean and sometimes they're really horrible and they're on your last nerve. And so I think it's also just to be aware of my autonomy and how I also have needs, and how we need to respect each other's needs and work within that family system to make sure that we're all working together at it, that it's not that it's not one or the other. And I think that's what I love about positive discipline as well, and all of, Adler's work, is that it's not about winning and losing. It's a very win-win horizontal situation. So we all can win if we have that framework, if we have that mindset. It's just, I think getting into that mindset can be very difficult when you're dealing with traumas from the past, when you're dealing with the here and now, especially with very young kids. When they get a little bit older, different problems arise, but with young kids, it's so overwhelming and it's all the time. And it's just this like, just, yeah, it's flooding your senses and it's very, very difficult. So I have huge compassion for everyone who's in that scenario because I was there. I'm finally kind of out of my youngest is 6. So I'm out of the throes of the intensity that comes with that age. But if you can kind of, I feel if you can get positive discipline into your life when they're very little, then that can be hugely helpful. It sets you up for so much positivity later on, and it solves so many problems, and allows you to have a very mutual respect, mutual autonomy as you grow together.
Love that. And I just named my podcast show last week, Effortless Parenting with Freedom and Boundaries. Everyone
Mm.
wants boundaries. And I think this is such an aha for a lot of people that as a parent, you have rights too. And
Yeah.
there is a way to communicate that with love, right? Parents with neurodivergence, and I already prefer that. It is a way nicer way than saying special needs, you know. I think you have an even nicer term. When we spoke last, did you mention like from the animal world, like this whole biodiversity, how we're all so different, you know?
Yeah.
So,
So neurodiversity is the
mhm,
term to essentially encompass all brains. So in the same way that we have biodiversity, that the whole world is one it's like it can be one ecosystem. You can have pockets of ecosystems. The whole world is biodiverse. In the same way that in social systems we have neurodiversity. And then within that neurodiversity, we have neurodivergence. And neurodivergence is the people whose brains are outside of the norm. And when I mean norm, I'm talking about a statistical graph, because I'm not talking about the semantics of what is normal. I'm really talking about the people who are showing traits that are on the significant sides of the statistical graph. So anything that is a divergent from the norm would be considered neurodivergence. It's now become a catch-all phrase, and people use neurodiversity and neurodivergence interchangeably, but those are the sort of what the accurate meanings are. But it's a catch-all really for things like autism, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, even Down syndrome, and there's a whole bunch that can go into there. But it's really looking at the brain, at humans' brains in a different lens than the medicalized psychological model of sort of deficit and sort of the DSM labels, like, autism spectrum disorder and hyperactivity disorder.
mhm.
So when we look at neurodivergence, it's not that it's a disorder, it's a variation in how brains are created in this wonderful world, and that we need all of them. And that's also not to minimize that there are struggles that come with these conditions, and being neurodivergent can come with many, many struggles, and being a parent of a child who's neurodivergent can be incredibly difficult. I saw a wonderful meme the other day that someone sent me. Maybe I'll send it to you and you can
Yes,
pop it over.
I
It
will.
was
I'll try. Yeah.
But it was somebody that was pouring a pot of coffee into a mug, and it said a neurodivergent parent trying to keep their cup full, and there's this massive wind blowing, and the coffee's coming out before it lands into the cup. And I thought that was the most perfect explanation of being a parent of a neurodivergent child,
Yeah.
because you can try your best, but it's all encompassing, and it's a lot. And so the neurodiversity model is very accepting, and it's not pathologizing things as much as the medical model would. But it is also not to diminish the struggles that people might be experiencing in their everyday, like lived experience, either being neurodivergent or having neurodivergent children.
And I know you found this out along your journey about yourself, right?
Mm.
And your diagnosis. Like, what is it that you would like a parent who's either maybe starting out or whose child, is being maybe, I don't know what the right term is, please help me out, who's kind of observed maybe,
Hmm.
for that diagnosis. Um, what is it you would like a parent to know who's maybe on their own journey, or it's actually two questions here. So let's start with that first part. A parent themselves who is looking, maybe because of their child that they are now asking themselves questions. What would you
Yeah.
like that parent to know, about themselves?
So many things.
Yes,
To
whatever
distill it.
comes first, Jess.
No, I think the first one is to go easy on yourself and easy on your kid, because it's a big thing to process. My own diagnosis, I was diagnosed as autistic and ADHD a couple of years back. So I think it was just before my 37th birthday, and it was a whole it blew my mind, shook up my world. Um, but at the same time, it was a very positive experience for me. I know it's not always a very positive experience for other people, depending on what their situation is, depending on what the needs of their child is, depending on what their needs are. So, for example, I don't have a corporate job where I have to go in and deal with a lot of people who might not understand me. I'm not discriminated against, so I don't have a lot of that to deal with, where I know that a very huge portion of people who are neurodivergent do have to fit into the structure of the neurotypical world. And so that was one of the reasons for me why I'm just incredibly lucky and blessed to not have had to go through that. But I can also acknowledge I have so many people in my circle and friends that have to go through that. And I see the struggle. Um, but whether it's a positive for you or whether it's a negative for you, either way, it's going to be very emotionally taxing. Well, for the people who I know who've been through it, it has been emotionally taxing. Maybe it won't be for you, but it can be. And so give yourself some time, give yourself space to process that. If it means speaking to someone who is a professional who can help you navigate that, by all means do that. Asking for help is not failure. It is one of the bravest things you can do. Um, it's also not the end of the world. I think that's another thing. There's an idea of and I've had to go through this for different reasons, but we have if something terrible happens where we something that disrupts our idea of what our path was going to be, it can make us feel like the world is over. Everything that I thought was going to happen is just chaos. And so that can be some sort of trauma. It can be a medical diagnosis. It can be a psychological diagnosis. And moving through that can be really, really hectic at the time. And on the other side, if you allow it, on the other side of it, it can be the biggest amount, like it can be such a growth opportunity. So let things be what they will be. It's not the end of the world. You might need to grieve the life you thought you might have had in order to welcome the life that was actually meant for you.
Oh, I love
Um, and I think that the other thing is just to talk back about those boundaries, because you've got children that might be neurodivergent or might have some other thing that they might need, or you might have had a diagnosis. It doesn't mean that you have to be any more lax about those boundaries, because remember, safety, we all want to give our kids safety. We want to give ourselves a sense of safety, and boundaries give us safety. So I think a lot of times when people, have a bit of a fright, maybe their child gets diagnosed with an ADD or an autism, and now they feel like maybe we should just be a little bit more permissive, because, they need to be a little bit more gentle. They need to do these things. And there's nothing wrong with being gentle, but there's safety in structure. There's safety in that I've got you. I will support you through this. And when you are lost and you're knocking around the sides of the walls and don't know where to go, I think we spoke about the roller coaster. I will be that harness that holds you in place while you're going through the roller coaster of life. Or if you're a river, if you need sandbanks to hold where the river's going to go. If you are on an expedition, you want your guide not to drag you by the hand and take you where you're going, but to just gently say what's safe, what's not. It's helpful when you know the guide's got your back. And so there is safety in someone saying no. There's safety in a parent going, these are still the rules of the house. This is still how we respect each other. It doesn't mean it's a get out of jail free card once you
Yeah.
get some sort of diagnosis. So it's okay to still parent the way you want to parent. Um, even though it might look a bit different and it might not be what you expect. But those are the ways that we grow. Those are the ways that we become who we're meant to be. It's how we get to be better than we thought we could be. It's how we know ourselves. It's how we can get to know our kids better. And so I think to sum all that up, because I told you it'd be hard to sum it up, but I think curiosity would be the one word I would go with, is be curious about the experience. Be curious about your child's experience. Be curious about your emotions, their emotions, and curious to options that are available to you, because there are so many these days. I mean, social media is just a it's just a cornucopia of amazing resources that you can get. So find your village, find people who get you, find people who get your experience, and then you will feel connected and it won't feel like such a lonely thing. Because I think it does, especially for the sort of neurodivergent population, it can be a very isolating experience.
Good. Oh, there's so much that I want to ask based on that. And thanks for bringing up the roller coaster again. I just had another thought on that roller coaster. I don't know what your words were, Jess. I was thinking that, like, our children on that roller coaster, and for years I had chosen not to even go on that roller coaster. I would say that I'm maybe part of that highly sensitive pool of 15 to 20% in the world. And what I'm observing with parents who are on this journey and the parent who's listening to this, um, to find these tools and equip our children with going on the highs and lows of that roller coaster is just, I think that's the gift of our generation, and where coming together maybe through social media helps as well, right?
I
And
think it does.
Mhm.
On that note, I think it can also be very noisy and quite
Yeah,
overwhelming.
that's
So
right.
that's why I say try and find your group. You don't have to be open to all of it. It might feel like it's just too much right in the beginning because there's too much information, too much, overload, and that can be very paralyzing. But if you kind of can find a pocket where you connect, because connection is everything. So find one or two places where you go, okay, this is a good space for me. And this is where I feel like I'm really seen, and where people I can, yeah, that the whatever's going on here that resonates with me, and find your place, because I do know that the internet can be a minefield as well. Even though it can be an amazing resource, it can also be quite overwhelming. So just like you say, get those tools, ride the roller coaster with your kids, and also you don't have to get it right the whole time. Because our lives don't stop being a roller coaster just because we're not kids anymore. It's crazy out there.
Yeah.
So, be gentle and find the people that you find might end up being your harness. They can be the ones that hold, space for you, and they create safety for you so that you have more to give as you continue to the next generation.
Absolutely. And you don't have to get it right all the time. I was thinking last week, I had a bit of an epiphany since we last spoke, that we, the way we all want to learn about boundaries when it comes to parenting, and how boundaries were set for us when we were children is often very different to how we practice that now. So we fall into old patterns. And I realized that a child is born knowing their boundaries, right? The 2-year-old who says no, and especially last time we spoke about the strong-willed child, and I asked you, why is a strong-willed child also a highly sensitive one sometimes? And
Mm.
and I realized that we know these boundaries so well, and when we're strong-willed, we come in with that ability to say, no, this is too much. Or a child who comes home from kindergarten, that was with children all day, like as a parent, and that's why our approach is incredible, that we help them to allow them their space when they need it, because if they don't, it's going to lead to the tantrums and the meltdowns. So what are your thoughts?
I love that. I think that when we're little and we don't have all these influences from the outside and we're kind of just our core self, we're so sensitive to our needs, our psychological, our physical needs. That's why when you're a baby, you've got cry. And that's what you do. I need something, I cry, and hopefully someone's going to figure it out. And there's no guilt about the crying. There's no shame about the crying. That all comes later when it goes, you're not allowed to cry now in this context, or you're not allowed to do that here. But when we're younger, we know what our body needs. We go, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I need affection, I need love, I need contact, I need. And then we get older, and as we grow up as children, depending on, your situation, you're often, that goes back to that attachment versus your autonomy. You're told that your needs aren't right, or they're not relevant, or they're not as important as maybe somebody else's. And so you learn other ways to fill those same needs, but they're not potentially all that healthy.
Yeah.
And so I think getting back to that core thing where there's the book, I think it's also Mate, where When the Body Says No.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and it's that thing where everything is saying no, but I can't because of all these other psychological pressures. And so getting back to that and recognizing that my child very often, and this is something that I have as a mantra. So I started before I was doing children, I'm an animal behaviorist and I work with animals, and they don't have any of these other dramas and social complexities that we have, that we convolute our brains with. So when I look at an animal, so I've been trained to look at animals as being very honest with their feelings. They either like it or they don't. They either feel safe or dangerous. They don't have really any malice. All that stuff is all anthropomorphism. We put that on them. There's
It's,
no evidence
say
that
that again.
animals anthropomorphism.
What does that mean?
It's attributing human psychological traits onto animal behavior.
Oh, we do
So,
that.
for example, there's no evidence that animals can actually feel, well, for example, dogs can feel jealous. But we always say, well, that one's jealous of that dog because that
Ah,
one's got the bone in that one. And it might be jealousy, but it also could just be want. And so jealousy is a very, highly cognitive, it's a much more higher cognition, and it's very complex in the brain. And so maybe it's not jealousy. Let's maybe kind of whittle it down to maybe it's just sadness. Mostly what we can be sure of with animals is that they either feel safe or dangerous. The
okay.
end. That we know for sure. And so when I look at an animal not being able to do something, so let's say you're trying to train your dog to sit, and you say sit, and they don't put their bum down. So you've trained them already, they know how to do it. And then you go to a different context and you say sit, and they don't do it. And you think, well, they're just disobeying me. Very unlikely, because dogs don't kind of know what disobedience is. What they're most likely doing is that they're very aware of their environment, and that in this new environment they don't know what the word SIT means and the context of it, so they don't know to put their bum down. Once they're kind of maybe more regulated, and then you say sit, and they go, oh wait, oh, I recognize that. Then they might put their bum down. You give them a treat, and they go, okay, I've got that. And that generalizes that kind of behavior. So it's very unusual that a dog or a cat or any animal won't do something. It's usually that they can't. Because in this context, I'm not able to do it. And that's my mantra that I use with kids as well, that even
Okay.
when they're being very disobedient, or they're being mischievous, or they're misbehaving, whatever or just any adjective that you want, disrespectful, there's a word that I'm trying to think of, um, resistant, anything that's just like the things that we fight with.
Yes.
It's usually not because they won't do something. It's because in that moment they actually can't. They're not feeling connected enough for them to be able to do it. They're too overstimulated to do it. And that sort of mindset, that shift, allows you to have a little bit more compassion in the moment, because they could, if insert reason here.
Mm.
So if they were more regulated, they would be able to do this. They would be able to help the teacher clean up the classroom if it wasn't so noisy.
Yeah.
There's, I think we always are doing our best. I genuinely believe that at every single stage of our lives as human beings, we're always doing our best. Even at our worst, that's the best we could do in that moment. And so I think having compassion for our kids and for ourselves is a really helpful way to kind of just give ourselves that grace that we can get it wrong, that they can get it wrong, that that we can move forward from this and that we can grow and that it can be together and that we don't have to hold on to all the stuff because that's what we do. We like to hold on to the stuff.
That's good.
And that's very freeing, I feel.
Yeah.
And then you have that freedom within those healthy boundaries that we create to keep each other safe.
And you just remind me of something to come back to this whole the defiance, right? And the demand
That's
avoidance. Say that again.
that's the word I was looking for,
Oh,
defiance.
defiance. Okay. So I was thinking like what is so incredibly helpful about Alfred Adler and this positive discipline approach is that we look underneath the behavior
Mm,
and what you just explained there with the dogs. Thanks for reminding me. You taught me this the last time, is that what I just learned from you and to also for the listener, to get a bit of an insight how positive discipline works is so the child has a primary need, and we learn that in our approach that they need to feel belonging and significance, and
mhm,
that sometimes because it's so important, they pick up these mistaken beliefs. So if there's a lot of demand, let's call it defiance, then that child's primary thing is. I need to be in control here, back to control, and I
yeah,
need to be the boss. So when this kind of almost that is so necessary, that tunnel vision, um,
mm,
and you've seen this probably in your children and in mine, where in that moment there's no way that they'll do what we say, and then
mm,
later on they come back. My child has so said to me before, when it's all calm again. I want to do what you ask me to do, I want to do that, but they
yeah.
literally cannot do it. So thank you so much for that connection.
And we do that too, right? I mean, how many times can we think back? I mean, if you're listening, think about a moment where you did not do what you wanted to do, and you were kind of watching yourself do it and like telling yourself don't, but you did it anyway because you're just on this train that you can't get off. And then that's what regrets are essentially, right? And then we ruminate about, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. And it's because we get stuck on those things. And I think it's good to think, okay, I did that thing. And I do this often with my kids if we're in a power struggle. And I tell myself, you're not going to get roped in. They're not going to hook you this time.
Yeah.
You're a grown up and
Yes.
do this.
Yeah.
And then I get hooked in
Yeah.
because I'm human. There's also very big,
As
very
do
important
I.
thing when you're listening. We don't get it right all the time by any means. Like I am not a perfect parent, and my kids are all over the show. So we're not doing this so that we can have these perfect inline children who do all the right things, who just say yes, mom, no, mom. It's so that we have this understanding and relationship. It's for ourselves to grow, right? And so when I think of a situation where my kids are fighting and I am now livid and I'm going, don't go to them, don't go, and I can even hear myself. So sometimes I even say it out loud, do not do it, do not, and I go and I do it. I do it anyway. And that's okay. That's okay. I used to feel very guilty about that and then like berate myself for days. But now the more that I practice self-compassion and the more I go, oh, you got on the train again, didn't you? You got sucked in. The more I do that and I go, it's okay. You know what? You're human. You can do that. The more I can move on from it. And then the next time it happens, I can be more aware and be like, I don't have to keep that, that tense control anymore. It's like, it's going to be what's going to be, release, release. And maybe I might get sucked in again, but maybe I haven't. And then I can give myself a nice big pat on the back for not getting sucked in and be like, yes, I did it. Did
Yes.
it. I'm
No.
winning. Um, and so I think it very much boils down to that self-compassion of like, it's okay. And there we're gonna get into these arguments. We're gonna have this defiance. We're gonna have these moments. It's not about avoiding all the moments. It's about what do we do in the moments? How do we reflect on them? How do we learn from them? How do we grow from them? Because it's not like, wow, okay, I'm gonna get involved in positive discipline and then everything's gonna be okay. And then I've arrived. That doesn't happen. You've never arrived. It just every day is going to be a new challenge because that's what life is. And so it's about how you roll with that and how you approach it for yourself, for your kids, and how that kind of links into your own values for your own family, and how it works for you. Because what works for me might not necessarily work for you. And if you're trying to do it my way and it doesn't work, then there's going to be conflict as well.
Mm.
So find your way and find the thing that helps you to be in flow and helps you to be in integrity, because that is then, I feel, where a lot of the freedom can happen.
Yeah. And you know, with the way you described yourself, that you kind of dive in. I think a lot of the parents who are faced with this, it doesn't work for them, this whole you have to do it this way. You know,
Mm,
we're here to explore all these different things, and the experiential activities that we do in positive discipline, they allow all that to come out for each parent, what works for them and their child. And we've got such a load of a vast variety of possibilities how to approach something, right? That every parent can pick and try out for their situation. And I
definitely.
want to come back, Jess, on you shared an article with me. If it's okay with you, I'll link it
Yeah.
underneath this video and in the podcast as well. That so this is all possibly a bit new for our generation of parents, you know, the diagnosis and how to handle it. And on my journey, you know, I had an eating disorder as a teenager. I went to a professional, and that he's basically said to me, I don't know if I shared this with you, he said, well, just wait 10 years. When you're 28, life will be so much easier for you, you know. And then unfortunately, not knowing how to deal with this sensitivity of mine, I numbed it all up and I just drank for the next decade, you know. Luckily I found tools to help with that. So I would love if you shared a bit about your journey and what
Mm,
happened maybe to you, and why with your diagnosis, you know, that it's not what we normally think as a community of what autism is, and how
mm,
there are all these different varieties, and to not limit ourselves with, you
mm,
know, what
mm.
that is.
Yeah, I mean, if I look back, I definitely myself had a very limited view of it. And I also want to be very specific. I'm not an autism expert. I don't practice anything to do with to in the sort of psychological world with autism. I just myself am autistic. I run a support group for autistic adults and parents of autistic children through the South African Anxiety and Depression Group. And so that's just something I do as a service to my sort of autistic community. I felt like there was a need for people like me to connect. Um, and so what I know about this is very much my own lived experience, and it's from the people that I associate with and the people who are in my sphere. So it's not, this is the information I give is not like a statistical yeah, don't go and Google all stats and tell me that I'm wrong. This is my experience.
Mhm.
Um, but essentially, when I was younger, I had lots of quirks and I had lots of sensitivities. I didn't eat a meal until I was about 2 years old. My mom said I lived on diluted apple juice, she said, for the most part. Um, and nothing, I wouldn't actually have anything else in. And if I look at it now, it would be, look, obviously it was a sensitivity, like sensory stuff. I didn't want to taste it. I didn't like the feeling of food. My first meal was a single pea when I was about 2, and everyone celebrated. Um, and so throughout, and then I had issues with like with textures and putting on socks and all these things. My mom actually, when I was in high school, saw a TV show about OCD, and there was a girl who had all these traits, and she was like, "Oh my gosh!" And she almost like she froze because I was exhibiting these things. But back in the day, I was just being odd, and I was just being difficult because, get on with it. That was the sort of mindset. So there's no sort of resentment there. It is what it is. And it wasn't picked up because autism is primarily picked up in young boys because of the way it presents, how it was originally studied as well. And so girls present very differently. Um, and I was hyperverbal. So, one of the traits of autism was like not being verbal. And so it wasn't picked up. And then throughout sort of teenagerdom, I had, I mean, I had a depression diagnosis, bipolar, eating disorders. I drank heavily in social situations because I cannot make small talk. I don't know how to do it. And I think that's when I went for my diagnosis when I was now 37. When my psychiatrist looked in the file, he very flippantly looked through it, was like, no, you've got social context, you're very connected, you can't be autistic. And having learned more since then, it's that he had the mindset of people who are autistic don't want to have connections. They don't want friends. They just want to sit in the corner and play with their train and have the rest of the world leave them alone. And that is so far beyond the truth. I can't even begin because a lot of autistic people desperately want connection. Some of us want it so badly that we might kind of come on too strong, and then that is just a little bit awkward, and then we get rejection. But then because of the sort of high sensitivity, then we're rejected and we're super sensitive to that rejection. And so now we're not going to try again. And then that leads to other diagnoses such as the depression and the bipolars and all those things. Now, those things can happen in isolation, but often, and specifically with women, we're diagnosed with things that are little bits and pieces of personality disorders and mood disorders and eating disorders, where actually what's happening is it's a neurodivergence. So your eating disorder is actually a taste aversion, and you're just a sensory avoider for those tastes, or a texture aversion. But you don't have the words for it yet when you're little, or in your teens. It kind of if someone's either overeating or undereating, and it goes, okay, cool, teenager eating disorder, that's a simple diagnosis. But I think if we look, as you say, under the iceberg and we look at what's going on underneath, there's so many reasons why that could be happening. And it could be a sensory thing. It could be a social thing. I don't feel comfortable eating while people are watching me. I don't want to do it in this context. It might be a germ thing. There's so many reasons why you might not want to be eating in a certain context, and then it gets misdiagnosed. And so you're kind of hopping around different professionals looking for a diagnosis. And that's why for me it was such a huge eye-opening moment, where it was like, this is autism. It's not these other things. Those things are symptomatic of this underlying, you're just built a little bit differently. And that's how it is. And once I had that acknowledgement of, okay, I function in a different way, I see things in a different way, and because of that, this is how it's manifested, a lot of those things have kind of fallen away. It's not that I don't still get anxious. It's not that I don't still have bouts of depression, but I wouldn't characterize myself as having a generalized anxiety disorder anymore, because I now understand that that anxiety was a result of putting myself into situations where I thought I was supposed to be able to cope, but I can't cope because I'm autistic. So that's, the lights are too bright, the noises are too many, there's so many people, and I can cope with in the moment, but that's me masking. And then afterwards, I can't. And so I break. And so it just gives a new understanding of why things might be happening. So if you feel like you kind of might have collected a whole bunch of diagnoses through your life, or different like labels, but they never really stuck. It might be worth looking into and being gentle with yourself while you look into, maybe this is a neurodivergence thing. Maybe I'm just on the outskirts of all the other brains. And outskirts is fine, because there's lots of us. Trust me. The statistics always say that there's like 1% of autistic people in the population, but I just feel like I meet them everywhere.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
there's so many of us, and we're all very welcoming. I don't want to talk for everyone. I don't like to make generalizations, but the people that I've met and the groups that I've created, um, everyone is so nice and lovely, and we want to be social with each other. And so it's not that mindset of just leave us alone, we don't want to be a part of your world. It's, we do want to be part of the world. Of course we do. We're people. It's just that sometimes we need to be acknowledged for things that might not be hard for you, like going to a shopping center and getting groceries is really, really hard for me. And it might not make sense, but in the same way that it's really hard for a child to do certain things, and it's really easy for an adult to do certain things. Same. It's just about, again, having that compassion and being respectful of people's needs.
And we spoke about this just on a different call. You're just reminding me, it's the, like, if us who are maybe more I don't even want to put these labels on anymore, but us who see life this way. And then the
Yeah.
others are, what did you say earlier? Just get on with it. What's wrong with you? Why can't you get on with it? Like, isn't it like on this planet at the moment, it's more like finding that bridge and that language to come together. And our mentor, who I want to bring in here as well, who always connects us, Deborah Owens-Hockey, I'm going to link her conversation here as well. She says that it's all about responding with respect to the
Mm.
uniqueness of every single whole person.
Yeah.
And that's beautifully put, isn't it?
Beautiful. She always has such a wonderful way of condensing something into something so simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very much.
So I had loads of questions, and thank you so much. There's like your connection with, isn't your other venture called Beyond? So Beyond Behaviors?
Beyond behavior, yeah. So beyond behavior is it's my animal behavior
Yeah,
company, and I do behavior consultations through there.
yeah,
And so I'm working towards being a registered counselor, which hopefully will then I'll be working with children and families, and because for me, yeah, working within the family system and helping parents and children to find that connection again, and to, if you've already got a really strong connection, to build upon that
yeah.
and to just get more insights and to get more awareness and all of that. It's all about looking again beyond the behavior into the underneath of the iceberg, and just, yeah, I think there's so many layers. We can never stop looking. We can never, it's infinite. So
I agree. I
yeah,
agree.
I think there is so much value no matter where you are in your journey, whether it be a personal journey or a parenting journey, any of that. It's limitless.
Yeah.
So I that's where I find a lot of interest, and that's where I'm moving towards. So yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about this stuff all day, as you know.
Oh, it makes
Um,
it all so exciting, and the variety. And we would love to hear from the viewer here on YouTube and the listener on podcast. All these diversities that maybe your child shows, that are not in maybe that manual. And um, to also add, I think this parenting approach goes all alongside that model, medical model, and I think it's so empowering for parents, that they can do something with how they parent their child, in addition to the medical model.
yeah.
So. Right now, I know you're super busy. 4 children, the animals. You're going off to the vet now to look after one of these little beautiful kittens. Um, if somebody would like to reach out to you to work with you, or to, I don't know, are you facilitating parenting courses? I'd love to link the
Yeah,
autism group
they're welcome to go to my
as
website,
well.
and there's
Um,
a form they can fill up there. Yeah.
so how can people find you? You've got your website.
Yeah.
I'll link that.
Beyondbehavior.co.za.
Brilliant. Okay. And any final thoughts or words before we close this? And I'd love to make this a whole series. So please, the listener, put in your comments or questions that we maybe could build on. Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah, I'd love to hear from the experiences of others, whether if they resonate, if they're very different. Because as the neurodiversity model has it, there's opposite sides. I think one of the things I do want to leave with is, number one, when we look at sort of spectrum, the word spectrum, we don't look at the word gradient. So it's not, when we talk about sort of, say, somebody on an autism spectrum, it's not that they're either not very autistic here and very, very autistic here. It's a color palette. And so a spectrum is not linear.
I
And that's one of the things that I think is really important to understand. And it's also a nicer way to understand yourself, like you said, and how Deb said, as a whole person. We're not a little bit this and a lot that. We're so much, it's the whole, right?
Oh,
That's
beautiful.
the one thing. And then the other thing is also not to be too afraid of labels, because sometimes having a label, like when I was diagnosed autistic, it was huge, because now that I have a word for it, I can find out more about it. It doesn't make me any less Jess, but it's also not a dirty word. Labels help us give meaning to things. If we don't know what a tree is, then we have to keep going, that brown stick with the green things coming out of it.
That's good
Labels
point.
can be helpful.
Yes.
Um, So it's not to shy away from labels. It's more about going, is there a stigma attached to this label? And how do we remove that stigma? How do we rather look at it with curiosity and going, oh, you're autistic. What does that mean for you? How does that show up in your life? Oh, you're ADHD. Are you like the very active type? Not don't have any of the terminology now. But is it like, are you in your head or do you run around like crazy?
Okay.
Just being curious about it, because there's nothing wrong with either of those things. But the moment we go, oh, I'm not going to call you the label because, oh, it might be triggering for you. We need to also work on those triggers ourselves and go, I'm actually stronger than that. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna own my stuff. I'm gonna own who I am. I'm Jess, and I'm autistic, and I've got ADHD and a whole host of other things, but that's just what makes me me. And it's not good, it's not bad, it just is what it is. So that's how I like to look at it, in that it is what it is, and you make of it what you will.
I love that you're ending on this. And when you were speaking, Jess, I was just reminded that the term holism that Adler kind of took came from South Africa, right? Wasn't it
Yeah.
called there? Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of that other truth seeker from that side of the world. Do you
Fritz
remember?
Pearls, I think.
Is it?
But I'd have to go back. I think it was Fritz Pearls, but I'd have to go back. My
Yeah.
psych lecturer, my 101, is gonna give me hassles because I've forgotten the names. But a whole bunch of people came
Yeah.
from South Africa. So many psychologists were from here, and then they moved over and spread stuff. So
Mm,
yeah, we
yeah.
have a very vibrant mental health history.
Absolutely. And I love that connection. Went to South Africa myself, that connection to the animals and what we can learn there and how it also sometimes works with human beings. It's just incredible.
100%. Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time today. And let's hope we'll make it a next time and enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you to all the listeners for tuning in. And I hope to hear from you all.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jess and got some more insights why you can't just be normal like everyone else. Our mentor Deborah Owen Sohaki shared how labels aren't bad as such and how we use them so we don't limit ourselves and see the whole child. I'm going to leave this video right here for you to watch next. Thank you.